Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, it's a Wednesday night when we're recording because we took Tuesday off to watch the Blue Jackets. So how are you doing today, now?
Just to be clear, only one of us took last night off to watch the Blue Jackets. I was ready to record because I am dedicated and love our listeners. Others choose to pretend Columbus is a hockey town, and that's fine. You know, whatever. This is not a this is a judgment-free zone.
Mm-hmm.
But
is it,
listeners? Just know, listeners, I'm the one who's on your team.
Well, that may very well be, but so what if that is how it is? I don't, whatever. It's no big deal.
The correct response there was, my statement presupposes that this podcast is a good and a benefit to the listener, which is it's an assumption and maybe a little bit of a leap.
Well, and that takes us into this week's show because I think the show has been beneficial in the past. Like last week's show was more beneficial than this week's show because like everything we've talked about in the last, month has played out in the last week with all of the quarterback shenanigans going on. So everything that we're going to talk about now, we have already talked about, whether it's JP Andrade out there going to be a Buckeye, Gunnar Hoke. I mean, we talked about him before, I think anybody else, before he was even in the transfer portal. Kyle McCord, we've talked about a few weeks back. And I'm thinking, Tom, we need to stop talking about what may happen because we're so good at this, it keeps happening. So let's only talk about what has happened from now on. That way we won't have to repeat ourselves when the stuff we say could be happening actually happens.
We should just issue a spoiler alert at the beginning of every show. Look, if you don't want to know exactly what's going to happen with Ohio State football, stop listening now.
Yes, exactly.
The other choice is that we rename this episode title, Thanks for the Download, Suckers, which, you're really setting that one up pretty well. So I don't know. You're the one who titles the episode, so that's up to you. But
right. And it just depends on how I'm feeling at the moment. Whereas, like you say, I don't care about the listeners. I do care about the listeners. And maybe that's what this episode title will be is Tony Cares. And that's really my motto.
I have nothing. I have literally nothing to add to that is relevant to our crew.
All right, so let's just go ahead and start the show. That way we can, the sooner we start it, the sooner we can end it. And how's that for a sales job? So Ohio State, which has been in a quarterback quagmire of late, in the past week, let's see, on the 23rd, which is a little over a week ago, let's just start on April 18th, when Matthew Baldwin enters the transfer portal. We've already talked about that. A week ago, Gunnar Hoke hits the transfer portal. And then on the 26th, you get JP Andrade committing to the Buckeyes. The next day, Gunnar Hoke commits to the Buckeyes. 3 days later, Kyle McCord commits to the Buckeyes. And it's not an ideal situation in terms of the 2019 quarterbacks because that's what really matters right now. But Tom, and the pieces that were available to Ryan Day, he has put together as, I don't want to say ideal, but the best possible quarterback situation, having lost Dwayne Haskins, Tate Martell, Matthew Baldwin. They'll go into this season with Justin Fields, Gunnar Hoke, Chris Chuganoff, and JP Andrade and Danny Vanatsky as the two walk-ons, which gives them more guys than they had last year, I believe, or right around the same. But five guys, two guys that can help the scout team quarterback situation. It's better than I think it had a chance of being, a few weeks back, but it still all comes down to Justin Fields staying healthy.
Any kind of Ohio State national championship season is based on Justin Fields staying healthy. And I don't think that there's really anyone around the program that would argue that, because I think there's a decent possibility that if Chris Jugganoff or Gunnar Hoke came in, they could keep the floor from falling out. And, if Justin Fields gets hurt, this does not suddenly turn into a 3-9 kind of team, but it's also not a 14-1 kind of team at that point. So you have limited your downside, but there's still a pretty significant drop off between 1 and 2. But given that less than 2 weeks ago, Matthew Baldwin announced that he was entering the transfer portal, and at that point they had 2 scholarship quarterbacks and 1 walk-on, to within a week of that day, or 9 days of that day, they had added a grad transfer with a Power 5 background, and they had added a 3-star as a preferred walk-on. That's about the best you could possibly do in that span of time. And I don't think that this is something where if you wait 2 more months, there's going to be a whole lot of other great options out there.
Right.
Because guys who are out there right now, or who are thinking about going out there right now, are almost certainly looking for a chance to play, and that's not really what you're going to get at Ohio State this year. If you're coming into Ohio State this year, you are assuming that if Justin Fields is healthy, Justin Fields is the guy. Now, there's no guarantee that Justin Fields is healthy, and there's a chance that Gunnar Hoke or Chris Jugganoff is the starter at some point this year. That's entirely possible. But you're not going in. I think Gunnar Hoke is coming in here with his eyes fairly wide open to the fact that he is probably not going to win the job in camp this fall, especially with it being his first season at Ohio State. So there are not other options out there that are better than the options that they just took. So this is making the best of a not ideal situation and really salvaging the situation to a remarkable degree.
Yeah, and I think as long as you have quarterbacks who have done this before, they'll have so much talent around them. Even Gunnar Hoke or Chris Jugganoff, if they're forced into action, there's so much talent around them that they will look better than they would at Kentucky or West Virginia. So that's going to help as well. The JP Andrade stuff, he is 24/7's number 57 quarterback. Some quarterbacks below him, like one guy, number 58, signed with Cincinnati. There's number 64 quarterback signed with Rutgers, number 65 with Ole Miss. There's even number 75 signed with Louisville. So there's 3 Power 5 teams signing quarterbacks who are rated below JP Andrade, who is a preferred walk-on and will be guaranteed a spot. We talked last week, of course, about Andrade, and maybe they offer him a scholarship just to get him here. They didn't need to, and I'm trying to talk with him to just get some insight into why Ohio State, or why was he so under the radar, because his numbers were big in high school. He's not a 5'9", 185-pound guy. He's quarterback sized, played in a good league, looks good on tape, and you wonder why some of these guys are the 70th guy at their position, and why when they look like quarterbacks are supposed to look. But he's a bonus, and just another, I don't want to say like a rabbit out of the hat, but that's about, it's not quite magic, but when you can get a guy who is rated ahead of guys who are going to Power 5 schools, and you can get them to walk on, it's, like we've talked about with Xavier Johnson, and who came to Ohio State as a 3-star wide receiver and walked on and is now one of the running backs in the running back room, and a talented guy, but the depth charts just aren't kind to walk-ons at Ohio State. But Andrade I don't know if he'll ever take a snap at Ohio State, but he does provide some insurance, not necessarily this year, but down the road, because as we've talked about last week, the week before, this isn't going to be like an ideal quarterback situation until 2022 or 2023, when they've got guy after guy, scholarship guy after scholarship guy, like top 10 quarterback after top 10 quarterback in here for 4 straight years before things are where Ryan Day wants them, and to where to the point where you can lose a guy to transfer. And that's the thing. Not just getting to that point where you have like 4 guys, which is hard, but you want to get to that point so that it's not such a heavy loss when you lose a guy to a transfer, because you're gonna. So if you sign one every 4 years, Tom, you're going to lose 1 or 2 of those guys, and that's why you have to get somebody every year. It's not like they want somebody every year just to pad the room. It's because you're going to lose somebody.
You're going to lose somebody, and it's not a position where you can just pull in a guy off the street and have him start usually, especially as a true freshman coming straight out of high school. I realize that Ohio State is pulling a guy off the street and having him come start in 2019. Justin Fields is, the hope for Ohio State would be that his tools and the fact that he's played in college for a year will give him a little bit of a leg up on other people. But that is not a position where you want to be starting completely from scratch every year. You want to have someone who's been in your locker room, who's been in your system for a couple of years, who you can plug in and know this guy can at least do a decent job. And that means you have to keep that room reasonably well stocked. You can't have the kind of turnover they've had in the last 12 months in that room, where Chris Jugganoff is now the senior man in the quarterback room. And he was until when Urban Meyer got suspended last year, Chris Jugganoff was not a Buckeye. Like, that is how, and he is the senior guy in that room now. Like, that is insane. That is insane. So it's not something that, excuse me. Urban Meyer wasn't suspended. He was placed on administrative leave.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Sorry. That's not a sustainable thing, because even if it happens to work out this year, because they had Chris Jugganoff, who was a very fortunate confluence of circumstances, and then you also had Gunnar Hogue, who was a very fortunate confluence of circumstances. That is not a guy that's going to be out there every year. They have gotten very lucky twice to get that guy. So, and you're not always going to get a JP Andrade quality player as a walk-on. There are several kind of best case scenarios for them in this, where you're getting a 3-star prospect who put up great numbers in high school, who, sure, I mean, you look at his tape and it's not, he does not look like Justin Fields throwing the ball, but he looks like, that could be that could be the guy who's the quarterback of a MAC team, and it wouldn't look out of place, I don't think. And you're getting him with literally no downside. He's not even costing you a scholarship spot this year. So bring him in, see what he can do. And he's a California kid, so I don't know if his parents are going to be thrilled about paying out-of-state tuition at Ohio State for 4 or 5 years. So if he's here for a couple of years, if Ohio State wants to keep him around at that point, give him a scholarship then. If he has proven himself worthy of a scholarship, give him a scholarship, and then I would guess he would stay. So it's literally a no downside move for Ohio State to bring him in as a preferred walk-on. And the potential upside there is at least someone who could stick around for a few years, provide a little bit of depth, run that scout team like you said, so you don't have to have Chris Jugganoff running the scout team or Gunnar Hoke running the scout team. And maybe he turns into something. I mean, think of it like a lottery ticket. You found a lottery ticket on the street. It cost you no money. And worst case scenario, it doesn't turn into anything and it didn't cost you anything. And best case scenario is it turns into something pretty good. So that's not bad for, I mean, you said you didn't want to call it pulling a rabbit out of a hat, but that's pretty rabbit and hatty to me.
If it's got 2 ears and it came from a hat, we Mike Yurcich comes from the Big 12, and we've seen Big 12 quarterbacks, be it Oklahoma State or Texas Tech, or like out in the Pac-12, Washington State, where a walk-on comes out of nowhere and just lights things up. Who knows? Maybe Ohio State is now on that level where some random walk-on quarterback is the best thing going on campus. That would be terrifying, bad.
It's the kind of offense where you have so much skill talent around you that you can just kind of out X's and O's people, or just you're the X's and O's and Jimmy's and Joe's thing. I mean, you don't need to be a world-beating quarterback to look decent in an Ohio State offense.
I agree.
And Gunnar Hoke in the Kentucky spring game, I don't have his exact stats in front of me, but he played with the second team against the first team defense, and his numbers weren't very good. But when he played with the first team offense against the second team defense, he was like 12 for 14 for 100 and something yards and a couple scores. So if Gunnar Hoke has a decent grasp of your offensive system and is playing against inferior personnel, Gunnar Hoke can do just fine, is I think my takeaway from that. And so guess what? Ohio State is going to play teams with inferior personnel quite a bit, I think, this year. So that would not be, once he gets in and gets a grasp on the offense, that then gives you a decent chance of fielding a reasonable representative Ohio State team, even if that's a 9-3 kind of team. Then that's great. That's better than what you would have been if you were just throwing, like a true freshman or redshirt freshman Danny Vanatsky walk-on kind of spot in there. That's really all that this is right now. It's depth and insurance, and that worked out pretty well.
Like 17 years ago, I watched Ohio State win a national championship when their worst player was the quarterback. So, crazier things have happened. But there's going to be so much talent around him, and it's not just the receivers that he has to throw to, and it's not just going to be quick screens and things like that. The running game, the system, the play calling, all of that would make any quarterback better. And then when you put Justin Fields into that equation, then things get pretty exciting. And we didn't talk last week about whether this will change how they use Justin Fields. I think it changes it a little, but he's still going to run the ball. He's too good not to. I know you guys only got to see like the spring game, but in the other practices that we did get to see, the little bit that we got to see, his running was a part of the offense, and a significant part because of how effective he was in doing it. I don't think you take that out of the playbook. Yeah, I think you reduce it, but he's too good at doing that to then say, no, we better not do that. You're hamstringing yourself a little bit in doing that. Yeah, you have to be careful. But Tom, I mean, we see how dynamic he is, and there are ways to keep from getting hurt or hit unnecessarily. Braxton Miller wasn't great at it. We know Dwayne Haskins didn't learn how to slide until he was, I believe, 26 years old. And it's just about, if you've already broken free, just feel free to not come into any head-on collisions. And really, there aren't going to be a lot of those, especially since quarterbacks and offensive guys are so protected anyway. You can get hurt on any drop back or on anything. So I don't know that you can play to not get hurt, but he has to run the ball because he's so good at it. I think they just reduce what they ask him to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to be real happy if they see him out there trying to run people over, but you can keep him kind of protected and say, look, slide. When in doubt, slide. When in doubt, go out of bounds. Don't be a hero. Just manage your contact, basically. And that's something that allows them to use that weapon of his legs and still kind of limit the risk to as much degree as you can. Like you said, quarterbacks get hit, quarterbacks get hurt all the time. It happens. That is not something that you can completely eliminate as a risk. But it's still, I mean, you have to use his legs. You have to. Because otherwise if he's not a threat to run, if he's not perceived as a threat to run, that takes away a lot of his skill set, because the threat to run doesn't just give you yards on the ground. The threat to run also keeps them from dropping more defenders back into the, it maybe makes them rush the passer a little less aggressively. It maybe keeps them from having an extra safety back. You have to have a linebacker play as kind of a spy, or a safety play as a kind of a spy kind of role. There's so many different ways that helps you, that they can't just ignore that. And I don't think there's any chance that they will ignore that. I think they're going to have to. They'll play it, and they'll use it to the degree that they're comfortable using it. But they just have to. There are ways to manage his contact, and I'm sure that they're working to make sure he understands all of those and will play within that system.
Mm-hmm. And Tom, then on Tuesday, the Buckeyes got a commitment from Kyle McCord, 2021 quarterback out of St. Joseph's in Philadelphia, the number 8 pro-style quarterback in the 24/7 Sports rankings, number 113 player overall, 6'3", 204 pounds, committed to Ohio State over offers from Arizona, Baylor, Boston College. I know Clemson was looking at him. I think Michigan, they had offered him. I know Michigan's kind of leaning towards J.J. McCarthy right now. Mississippi State, North Carolina, Penn State, other schools like that had offered him, Texas A&M. So some major schools, and Ohio State zeroed in on him pretty early, and Ryan Day went after him hard, and it seemed like this was just a matter of time, and gets the 2021 class they've already got Jack Sawyer, the number 2 player overall defensive end, number 1 defensive end out of the Columbus area, but now you've got Sawyer, you've got Kyle McCord, and when we talk about writing RIGHTING quarterback situation at Ohio State, you've got Jack Miller in 2020, Kyle McCord now in 2021, and now you can just build around him, and you've got all of these recruiting classes are going on concurrently, and it's never one at a time anymore. So getting Kyle McCord in now, it's about 3 months earlier or so than they got Jack Miller last year, and now you've got a guy who can go out and start recruiting for you as well. A strong arm kid, 6'3", 204. I think kind of the prototype of what we should expect Ohio State to be recruiting under Ryan Day. I know they have Justin Fields, who is not quite like that, but Kyle McCord is more in the Dwayne Haskins mold, and he can move around well enough in the pocket to get out of trouble, but obviously relies on his arm. And with the way Ohio State is recruiting skill position players, he should have plenty of talent around him. So it's continues the good start in 2021 for the Buckeyes, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big pickup because, I mean, if you watch his film, it's like, oh yeah, no, that's a guy who'll do quite well in a Ryan Day offense. And he is a very much a prototypical pro style quarterback size wise, 6'3", 204 pounds. Like, he's already got good college size. Like, you could throw him on a college field and next to all the other quarterbacks at Ohio State, and he wouldn't look out of place already. And he's got another 2 seasons of high school football to play. So that's already a good start. And he is, in addition to kind of helping to solidify that quarterback position for the foreseeable future, he also, like you mentioned, the quarterback is very often kind of one of the key recruiters in the class. It's great for the coaching staff to build relationships with the players, and that's all great. But when you have kind of an in-class recruiter who can kind of help do that work for the coaching staff and who can communicate with other recruits during quiet periods and that kind of stuff, that's a huge asset. So to have a top-level quarterback who's someone that other offensive skill players are going to want to play with, and to have a defensive end like Jack Sawyer, who is at the top of his class, then who should be a draw for other kids who are on defense, who he'll be playing all-star games with and all that kind of stuff. That sets that 2021 class up pretty well. And oh, by the way, Kyle McCord is high school teammates with Marvin Harrison Jr., who is a top, I think he's, yes, I was going to say he's top 50. I was way off. He's number 51 overall in the class of 2021. Wide receiver who is widely expected to be an Ohio State commit at some point, just as McCord was. The one thing that was kind of interesting with McCord was I asked someone who was in a position to know some things about his recruitment. I asked, so are they looking at potentially bringing in a second quarterback for 2021? Because that's something we've talked about. And it sounds like there's not going to be the second quarterback in the way that we talked about it, where you just bring in another lower level pro style Ohio 3-star guy that you're stealing from a MAC team. That doesn't sound like that's the plan for right now. They may bring in someone else, play him at a different spot, and then they're kind of an emergency quarterback. So I don't know if that's like a Jalen Marshall type, where a high school quarterback but will play wide receiver and can play quarterback if needed, or if they they're looking at like a Torrance Gibson type, something like that. Not sure exactly what that could look like, but that's kind of where that sort of stands right now. Because I know that's something we've talked about in the past, and kind of wondering if they were going to change exactly how they're approaching that quarterback recruiting. And it sounds like they're not. That's not any kind of imminent change there.
Yeah, and you mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. There's also two really good Ohio receivers in the 2021 class that the Buckeyes are heavily involved in. Jaden Ballard out of Massillon, he's the number 17 receiver, the number 115 player overall. And then you've got Lorenzo Stiles Jr. out of Pickerington Central, who's the number 15 receiver, the number 108 player overall. So another legacy in that class. And that's not even including A.J. Kirk, the safety out of Dublin Kaufman, who is Mike Doss's brother. So if it could be a pretty interesting 2021 class just based on like what the family days will be, when everybody comes in on Thursdays or Fridays, whenever Urban Meyer would have that, Brian Days continued that. You'd have all of these just Ohio State legends, NFL legends coming in, and that just helps recruiting even more. Now, Jaden Ballard, I do not believe he is related to Jake Ballard. I think he's just his own thing. But I did see today on Twitter he ran like a 4.45 at Massillon, so he's fast. He's like 6'2", and if they could get Harrison, Stiles, and Ballard, those are three very talented wide receivers, and then whatever else you get in that class is a bonus. So we had mentioned in the past where the 2021 class might be a little off just because players are waiting to see. It's a transition class, and you get that a lot. And maybe then everything really picks up again in 2021, provided things go well. But when you've got a guy like Kyle McCord who is already ready, and he has his faith in Ryan Day, and like we've mentioned before, this could be the start, or Dwayne Haskins could be the start of Ohio State becoming a QBU, a quarterback U, where they send Haskins to the NFL. Justin Fields, at this point, the expectations are that he would be a high draft pick. Then you've Jack Miller, Kyle McCord, where it could be a destination place for quarterbacks who want to go to the NFL, like it is for cornerbacks who want to go to the NFL, or receivers who want to go to the NFL. If you start at Ohio State, there's not much better stage, and you will be seen, and you will end your career, or you'll begin your NFL career in a camp. Like Ohio State had 15 players either leave early this year or exhaust their eligibility. Of those 15, 13 have signed deals to be in NFL camps. They will get an NFL paycheck. The two who won't, or at least haven't at this point, will be kicker Sean Nurnberger, which that's kickers you just don't know, and then Brady Taylor, who offensive lineman, center for Ohio State, who has been dealt with injuries throughout his career, and had he been healthy and played, he'd be in a camp somewhere as well. So basically, everybody who exhausted their eligibility and who could be in a camp right now is in a camp, or not that the camps start now, but will be in a camp or will at least cash an NFL check. And I don't think you can ask much more than that, Tom.
No, you can't ask more than that. And that is just a complete, I mean, if you were going to draw the college football team life cycle, that's it. recruit to player to NFL camp, and when recruits are looking at where they want to go, they're looking at which school is producing NFL players, and thus the cycle begins anew again.
So, Tom, when you mentioned that, reminded me of, like, so you're saying that that's part of the recruiting cycle. So say you put this social media package together for all of the players in your uniform that are now in an NFL camp. Would it be okay to also include 2 players who transferred out prior to last season and played 2018 on other teams? Would that then be okay to include them in your social media post about, hey, look at all of these NFL players, all of these Wolverines we're sending to the NFL, when in actuality, 2 of those players didn't play for you last year? Are you saying that that's okay? I'm a little confused.
I was trying to remember if they did that when the firstborn transferred from Michigan to Ohio State. I mean, they did claim last year on Michigan social media, they claimed Taylor Decker and a bunch of other Ohio State players as Ed Warner products. And, look at all these NFL draft picks that Ed
Pat
Warner
Elflein
has produced. So
yeah,
Pat Elflein. Yep. So I mean, it's not the most objectionable thing that they've done in order to self-aggrandize, but it was like, I mean, if you want to brag about Wilton Spate, that's sad on at least 2 levels, but okay, sure, you do you.
And because what we're talking about, if you don't know, Michigan put out like all of these faux football cards in one tweet of all of the players who will be in NFL camps, and there's probably, I don't know, 10 or 12. Seemingly, 2 of those are Wilton Spate, quarterback, and Ian Bunting, a tight end who I believe transferred to Cal. But as somebody tweeted to me, like it's sad when you have undrafted free agents above the fold. Basically, like, there weren't enough draft picks in their post to hide the ones that were undrafted free agents, and so that's what Michigan's, that's how they're touting now, and not now. That's how they've touted in the past as well. And so thank you for reminding me of that. We almost didn't even talk about that when it's something that we always enjoy talking about. So good work for you. Good work by you, Tom.
Glad to have said nothing at all about it, but have triggered something deep in the recesses of your memory. Just glad to be playing a part of the show this week.
On Wednesday, I wrote about the quarterback timeline since Ryan Day has been at Ohio State, and I don't need to go through step by step, but he was hired on January 3rd of 2017 as offensive coordinator, and from that time, there have been 15 quarterbacks who have either committed, decommitted, transferred, or played. And when you've got 15 quarterbacks in the span of about 28 months, so you're talking about, like, there's significant quarterback movement every 2 months of his tenure. It's insane to think that things are just going to carry on. But as long as you've got, if you go from JT Barrett to Dwayne Haskins to Justin Fields, things should be fine. But there's just been so much movement, whether it's, and we're not even including like Emory Jones committing, his decommitment is in there, but you've got Tristan Wallace a couple of years before that who decommitted. Danny Clark doesn't even fit into this time frame, but you go from Tate Martell, even like when Joe Burrow broke his hand in practice and switched the balance of power from Burrow to Haskins, I mean, that was a significant thing. And there's just, if you check it out and you read it, there's just one thing after another. Even one thing we almost forgot to put in, which was JT Barrett being attacked by a cameraman, or, you know, like you mentioned to me, like Jackson Carman tweeting that Dwayne Haskins should be starting. And it wasn't just Jackson Carman. It was also Micah Parsons. It was also Jaden Woodby. And it's interesting that those three, who were all, you know, leaning towards Ohio State, Jaden Woodby was committed at one point. They all were calling for Dwayne Haskins to start during the 2017 season, and none of them ended up as Buckeyes. And is that JT Barrett's fault, Tom? Is that Urban Meyer's fault? Yes to both. Definitely yes to both. What do you think?
I mean, Micah Parsons, there was the whole weird college game day thing where he went up on the set. He went up on the set on his official visit to Ohio State, and it was considered an improper benefit, and they had to stop recruiting him. So that was fun. There's one reason that he's not at Ohio State. Whoopsie-daisers. But yeah, it that sure is interesting that those guys are, you know, were those three guys, and then none of them ended up Ohio State. Uh-huh. And you can make a pretty interesting argument that Jackson Carman ended up doing just fine because he ended up at Clemson, and, you know, they had an okay year last year. And when he committed to Clemson, he had cited the fact that Dabo Swinney had told him that Urban Meyer wouldn't be around all that long, and everyone in Columbus kind of blanched at that. And then all of last year, you know, happened, and then that looked a little prophetic. Jaden Woodby ended up at Florida State. That is not looking so like such a great choice, but that's. It's interesting that those three guys were the people that were kind of vocal about that. The whole timeline was so interesting because you messaged me that you were, you know, working on this, and I went through in my head and I said, okay, let me put together a list of the quarterbacks, because we didn't have a count at that point. So I just started typing out a list, and I was just about ready to send it to you, and I forgot Chris Chugunov. And then I was just about to send it to you, and I forgot Matthew Baldwin. And then it was like, and there was like one other, it was like, because I'm like, I got to like 11 or 12, and it was like, okay, this has to be everyone. It was like, oh, nope. There's the guy who's still on the roster. Oh, nope. There's the guy who's the guy who just left.
Danny Vanatsky.
It is. No, I remember Danny Vanatsky. Yeah, it is absolutely remarkable that a position that is, you know, a team leadership position that is supposed to be, you know, kind of a stability on the team, and you don't have very many of them, and it's, you know, this prestige position, and they are just cycling them through them like crazy. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, and the change from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day is one of them, and there was a little bit of a philosophical shift in the types of quarterbacks that they were recruiting at one point, and you know, Emory Jones was kind of waffling, and that's why Matthew Baldwin came in, and all of that. So there's all sorts of explanations for it, and the transfer portal has kind of sped up the quarterback timeline for just about everyone. So that's not a unique thing for Ohio State. But yeah, just looking at that article, it was like that is a lot of stuff all at one position in one room that has 4 or 5 guys in it most years, for that to happen in the span of 2 years and 4 months.
And all of it would be okay if Dwayne Haskins had come back. You know, you could withstand any of that if you have Dwayne Haskins coming back, assuming you also have Justin Fields, which I don't know that would happen. But in speaking about Dwayne Haskins, let's move on to the NFL draft, which was last weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And in last week's show, we already had our conversation about how stupid it would be of the Giants to take Daniel Jones over Dwayne Haskins. And here we are 1 week later, and the Giants did exactly what we laughed about them possibly doing, which I guess the fact that we talked about it doesn't mean, you know, it means that that's not a surprise, because it is, I guess, the Giants, and it had been rumored. But David Gettleman, the Giants GM, I believe he is, after the pick, talked about falling in love with Daniel Jones after watching him for 3 series at the Senior Bowl. And Tom, think about the Senior Bowl, like, defenses are only allowed to do so much and be so complicated, and it's a fairly controlled environment. Like, if you were to watch 3 series of Dwayne Haskins against Michigan or Penn State or something like that, that might give you a better picture. Or watching Daniel Jones against Florida State or Clemson or literally anybody else other than the Senior Bowl and see how he operates, how he leads a team, how he handles adversity, I think you would get a better picture. And then also, I'm not sure that Gettleman was really watching Dwayne Haskins because he talked about Ohio State being in the Big 12. And I think back, this whole East Coast thing where I don't think people in New York understand college football, nothing Gettleman was saying or doing has dispelled my belief that people in New York should not be around college football. And no offense to you, Tom. I know you're one of these East Coasters, but give me a break, man.
I've got to say, the most surprising part of this to me as a Mets fan is that apparently there's a team in New York that's run by idiots who don't know what they're doing. Like, is that possible? I can't think of another example. Not even one. The whole thing is just, it's so remarkable to me. Literally no one who watched Daniel Jones went, that's a first-round quarterback, let alone that's a top 10 quarterback. Literally no one outside of this one guy who happens to be the guy who makes a vote for the pick for the New York Giants. The 3 series thing is just lunacy. Do you know who else looked good for 3 series?
Who?
Joe Bauserman against Akron in 2011.
That is true. He looked pretty good.
Steve Bellisari against UCLA in 1999.
Heisman.
Like, yes. Yeah, you know what? 3 series is actually not a sufficient sample size. And I don't want to blow anyone's mind here, but there is actually tape available of him playing other games too. That you may want to look at. You may want to just pop that in. Just scrub through it a little bit. You don't have to watch every play, but just, get a representative view of what he did.
I wouldn't do that. It might make him look bad. Don't look for confirmation that you're wrong. Don't watch the tape. Are you crazy?
My absolute favorite part of this was he said they might look at the Aaron Rodgers model.
Yeah.
Which was, he sits behind Brett Favre in Rodgers' case, sat behind Brett Favre for 3 years. And a reporter asked him, so are you saying that he might sit for 3 years behind Eli Manning? You spend a top 6 pick for a guy who could sit for 3 years? And his exact quote was, "We don't know. Life's too short. You don't know how this thing is going to work." As I wrote on the site, eat at Arby's. Yeah, if you can add that to the end of your GM's quote, and it sounds exactly like something off of the Nihilist Arby's Twitter account. Like, yep, okay, that's probably a great sign. You're doing great, sweetie. Good job. Keep it up.
He's up there. He's like, life's a party. Who knows? We're all gonna die tomorrow. Let's just have some fun and make some crazy picks, man. And he did. Like, the thing, if they go with the 3-year waiting period, like, every first round rookie contract is 4 years with the team option for the 5th. So you let him sit for 3 years, and then you have to pick up the 5th year just because, well, you can't just go 1 year and then let him go or whatever. And then to be like, no, you can't sit somebody who is the number 6 pick that long when your starting quarterback, you've been thinking about replacing him for, 3 years now, and now you're talking about another 3 years. And I remember last week saying it's too bad the draft wasn't in New York so we could see how the fans would react. But thankfully, Tom, there were enough New York Giants fans in the crowd that we did get to see how they reacted to the draft pick, and they did not like it. And another great thing about YouTube and Twitter is other Giants fans posted their own reactions on the internet, and they too did not like it. I think the only 2 people who like the pick are Gettleman and David Cutcliffe, the head coach at Duke. And I think they are both biased.
This is one of those things where if literally everyone else in your business thinks you are a complete lunatic for doing something, you'd better be real sure you're the smartest guy in the room. And I mean real sure if you're going to do it. And if you listen to him explaining the pick later and defending the pick later, that did not sound like the smartest guy in the room.
No.
So I have a sense, I know how this one's going to go. Just like I kind of had a sense last year how the Josh Allen top 10 pick for Buffalo was going to go. Like, I don't think you might want to watch some college football. Like, have someone on your staff who watches college football. Even if it's just a guy who sits in his recliner and eats nachos and drinks beer on Saturdays.
Thank you. That's a great idea.
All of those people are going to tell you the same thing. You're an idiot. What are you talking about? Did you watch any of their games? And then he'll say no, and they'll say, oh, you should watch. Here, watch this game where Wake Forest completely shuts them down and beats them 59-7. That should be a pretty good. Are there any defenses in the NFL better than Wake Forest? I don't know. Maybe.
Don't know.
Who's to say?
2000 Ravens.
Enjoy Arby's.
I think if you could verbalize Mark Davis's haircut, the owner of the Raiders, it would be David Gettleman explaining away why they took Daniel Jones. But, maybe we'll be completely wrong. We've never been wrong on this show before, as evidenced by the first half hour of the show today. But let's move on to the next pick, which was Paris Campbell, who I think has all of the abilities to be a productive NFL player. But I think I have some of the same concerns as I think some of the people in the NFL about. We never really got to see him do well or do much on the outside because he had been in the slot his final 2 years when he was really perfecting his craft and finally a more realized wide receiver. Because if you remember, when he got to Ohio State, he was a running back at Akron, St. Vincent St. Mary, but he got to Ohio State and they put him out wide. And we remember that he did not look great doing that and was not very productive. So I wonder how that transition will go, or does he remain in the slot? I do know, Tom, that just get him the football, and it may not be may not be out wide, but as he gets more comfortable, he's fast enough and strong enough to at least do stuff and be productive while he's learning. I think he's different than Curtis Samuel, but maybe have that same type of impact. And Samuel, I think, was hurt his rookie year, but where every few games he'll be trending on Twitter for a play that he made. And I don't know, where are you on his NFL future? I wonder how well he will adapt outside, and if that's something that he'll have to do. I think he will have to do it, but I don't think he's a sure thing. I think he has some sure abilities, though.
The first thing that's a positive is he's playing indoors on turf.
Yeah.
That's a very good start for him. If he can play indoors on turf for half of his games, and you're in the AFC South, so you're playing, in generally warmer weather for some of your division games, that all puts him in a decent position to succeed. I think at this point, if you are an Ohio State fan, you have watched enough Paris Campbell to know there are some things he is very, very good at, and there are some things that he's not great at. And it's going to pretty much just be a matter of how much the Colts are willing to let him, put him in those positions that he's good at, let him do the stuff he's good at, and don't try and square peg round hole him. Like, there were good outside wide receivers available that you could have signed. That's not necessarily his game. That doesn't mean it couldn't be his game. Maybe he'll turn into a good outside receiver. That's not probably the best place for him. So, just in terms of team and field that you're playing on, it's a great fit. Let's see what the Colts decide they want to do with him, and that'll tell you pretty much how his pro career is probably going to go. He has the ability to have a very good and nice long pro career and be a very productive pro. but you have to put him in the right spot. I would assume if they picked him that high that they have a sense for what they want to do with him and are probably going to try and keep him in that role where he kind of makes sense, probably, right?
Gettleman. I'm just saying, like, if he's got a job in the NFL, I mean, let's not give the guys in the NFL too much credit here. When we,
Sorry, I'm giving Jim Irsay the benefit of the doubt. Sorry, my bad.
Terry McLaurin goes to the Redskins and is reunited with Dwayne Haskins after their long time apart from each other of 4 months. It's been fun to watch both Paris and Terry McLaurin become these NFL prospects because, 2017, 2016, I don't think, you assume, like, if you start at Ohio State, you should be able to play in the NFL. You should eventually get that chance. I don't know that we really necessarily thought that about those two guys, and maybe especially McLaurin, who had some struggles, but the way he has bounced back these last 2 years and to make himself into a day 2 draft pick is very impressive to me. And I don't know what kind of wide receiver he's going to be. I know he'll do whatever he is asked. However he can make the team better. That's, like any team he is on, you would expect to be better than if he wasn't there. And maybe his floor is Steve Tasker and his ceiling is well beyond that. But I look forward to watching him. I don't know how much he'll do this season in terms of catching the ball. We don't know how much Dwayne Haskins will do in terms of throwing the ball. But he's the guy, as we've probably said before, he's easy to root for. And I think it was John Gruden who said at the Senior Bowl, like, he'll be in the league for 9 or 10 years. And just his progression and how hard he works and his details for the game, I want to believe that,
Yeah, I don't think he's going to have the best NFL career of anyone, but he might have the longest. Like, that would not surprise me if he just was a beloved team role player, the kind of guy who, even if he doesn't have a 600-yard receiving season at any point in his career, he's probably still the kind of guy that a lot of people are buying his jersey just because he's the community, the fixture in the community and the football savant's favorite guy who's the under the radar guy who does all the little things and, every coach's favorite player. Like,
there will be highlight packages of his blocking.
Yeah. Highlight packages of his blocking, highlight packages of him as a gunner. Yeah. Like, he's going to do all the kind of stuff that he will be the guy that the coaches rave about and fans who don't watch games in a particularly discerning manner constantly yell about why are the coaches raving about this guy. He's only had 400 yards receiving this year, whatever it is. Like, he could very well end up with numbers much better than that. But if he doesn't, the coaches will still rave, and then the fans will wonder what do they possibly see in this guy? And it's literally all the little stuff. He does all of the little stuff. He is one of the nicest, most impressive kids that you can possibly imagine. Just always nice, always a very thoughtful guy, and just he will be a beloved fixture wherever he ends up. And the fact that he's with Dwayne Haskins probably only helps. I mean, if you were going to get him on the field and make him a productive receiver, having him work with the quarterback who he played with in college is probably a good way to kind of get yourself pretty high on the raise the percentile of the performance that you're getting out of him in his first few years.
You're right. He's basically Aaron Kraft, but with a better 3-point jump shot. You've described him very well. The rest of the draft, and I didn't actually write down where everybody went, but I'm wondering, like, who of the remaining guys, be it Michael Jordan, Isaiah Prince, Mike Weber, Draymond Jones, like, who do you think has the best career of those next guys. Because I look at all of these players. I don't know that I have super high hopes for Isaiah Prince. Kendall Sheffield, we'll see. We all know he's fast. Does he take to his new coach? I think maybe I might go with Michael Jordan joining Billy Price and Cincinnati. He won't have to play center. He can play guard where I think he's better and more comfortable. But if you're asking me, or if I'm asking me, which I am, who of the rest will have like the longest or the best career, I might choose Michael Jordan instead of Draymond Jones, even though Draymond Jones is really, really good. And I think he's overlooked for what he did last year. And just because you're a third-round draft pick at defensive tackle, don't get too down on somebody for that, because it was a very, very deep defensive line draft this year. And I think it keeps getting deeper and deeper every year with just the way teams keep cranking these guys out. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Draymond can do in Denver. He's a productive guy, but I think maybe I might side with Michael Jordan over everybody of the non-top three in terms of the best career. Where are you?
Those are the two guys that I would put at the top of the list, and probably in that order.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan just seems like the kind of guy who is going to have a very good, productive career. Not necessarily be an all-pro, but just kind of be one of those guys that 8 years from now he's still the starting left guard for the Cincinnati Bengals,
right?
Or and similar to Terry McLaurin, the fact that he's coming in and he's going to play next to a guy who he played with in college is probably going to speed up his learning curve a little bit, because he's going to know Billy Price a little more. Billy Price can explain things to him in a way that, okay, well, at Ohio State we called it this. Here they call it this, or whatever. Explain the concepts in a way that make it easy to understand. That's all going to help. And I'm sure Billy Price, knowing Billy Price is happy to help anyone, but he has an existing relationship with Michael Jordan that can only help keep things, keep them working together, and hopefully speed up Michael Jordan's learning curve to get to the pro level. But yeah, I mean, Draymond Jones is a good pick there too, because isn't Denver a 3-4 team? I think so. He could play. He could play like maybe a 5-tech. He could have a pretty good career there too.
Yeah, I think he could be a 3-4 defensive end for sure. I mean, that's what he was.
Yeah,
he was defensive end in high school.
Yeah, that wouldn't be that was not a bad spot for him to land either. I think there were probably teams that were good fits and teams that were not great fits for him. That seemed like that was a spot that he could thrive. So he's another person that I could see. But just Michael Jordan, something about Michael Jordan, I just feels like, yep, that's just a guy who's going to have a nice long NFL career and probably make a decent amount of money.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where I see, like you said, I don't know that he's going to be a Pro Bowler, but one of those guys where the team isn't trying to upgrade at his position every year, where you've got a lot of guys who hang on, but the team is constantly trying to upgrade the position, and they draft players at that position, but then the guy they're trying to replace still kind of wins out, and then the next year they try to draft over him again. And I think Michael Jordan is a guy that they just leave alone. Just he's fine where he is. He's fine doing what we're doing. He's producing, and I mean, it's not like there's a lot of glory out there for offensive guards. So just let him be, and I think he'll be okay. Mike Weber, would he go in the 7th round? That's what's in my mind?
Yeah. Seventh round to the Dallas Cowboys. Picked 218 overall.
And I know Ezekiel Elliott was happy about that. I don't know that Mike Weber is happy, but I'm sure he's happy to be drafted and to be going to the NFL. But he's a guy that hasn't always had, I guess, maybe a realistic expectation for himself or his situation. As you think back to his redshirt freshman year in 2016, when after the Clemson game, he was upset. He thought he was going to rush for 2,000 yards that year, and seemed like after every time we talked to him after a bowl game, things aren't great, and he's not too happy, and wasn't happy with his number of touches against was it in a Cotton Bowl against USC. Just towards the end of the season, not getting as many touches as he'd like, and I don't think that was necessarily the case last year. But this is a guy who has been injured every year of his career. And so he drops for, I think that reason is one. But there were so many running backs in this draft where, like a guy like Devin Singletary, who has put up huge numbers at Florida Atlantic, is still out there. Rodney Anderson from Oklahoma, who had injury concerns, but he was still out there for a long time. And so he's going to Dallas now. He'll be behind Ezekiel Elliott. Rod Smith is gone, but they also drafted a running back ahead of Weber in the 4th round, a kid from Memphis, I believe. So he's not even guaranteed to make the team, but I think if you've got 3 running backs and he's one of them, then that's a good setup. But, I think he probably expected to maybe continue splitting carries as a rookie, as he has done in the last 2 seasons. But this might be kind of a wake-up call. I don't know that anything would have changed, Tom, if he would have come back for a 5th year, maybe to prove that he can stay healthy. But if he can't, then what good has he done? I wonder if he would have been drafted higher if he would have left after the 2017 season when he was thinking about it. And at that point, we thought he was going to leave based on the way he was reacting after the game. Do you think he would have been drafted higher had he left after his redshirt sophomore season? Did he hurt himself by coming back?
He might have. I mean, I saw people wondering if he made a mistake leaving this year, and it's like, what was he going to do to improve his stock next year, meaningfully improve his stock next year? I mean, it's the same conversation we had last year when he came back. He just has to stay healthy and be a consistent runner all season, and that didn't happen for him last year. He was banged up a little bit again, and the offensive line didn't do him any real favors last season, and so his numbers dropped a little bit. And so he ended up not helping himself at all in 2018. And with J.K. Dobbins back this year and the offense potentially going back to a little bit more of a running quarterback, there weren't going to be a ton of carries this year. So how much was he going to help us draft stock this year? So in retrospect, sure, he doesn't probably get drafted lower after his redshirt sophomore season. If he had left after 2017, he might have gone a little higher. I don't remember exactly how deep the running back class was last year, but he just kind of, I think he is one of those guys who is what he is at this point. Yeah. And he could have, he could be a decent NFL running back for a little while. And with running backs, the answer is always go pro if you think you can go pro, because the career length is so short there that, unless you have a very compelling reason to stay, you're always better off going pro. It would be interesting to see what Mike Weber's Ohio State career looked like if J.K. Dobbins was not, all caps, 2 exclamation points, J.K. Dobbins in 2017 when Mike Weber got hurt. Or if Mike Weber just hadn't gotten hurt in the, summer camp. If he hadn't torn that hamstring in summer camp in 2017, he's the starting running back, and probably, if he can stay healthy, has a good season, then he's a 2nd or 3rd round pick probably. But he didn't stay healthy. He got hurt. J.K. Dobbins basically stole his job, and that was probably not going to change this year. So go get your money, and hopefully it works out for him. But there are no guarantees as a 7th round pick, and he's not, he is not someone who's a special teams assassin like Terry McLaurin, who's necessarily going to be able to keep himself on a roster that way. So you never know with cap figures, and is the Cowboys backup running back someone they can cut and save money for the cap or something like that. Like there's all sorts of stuff that I'm not qualified to talk about in terms of his likelihood of making a roster. But
you're more qualified than Dave Gettleman.
It's not. Well, I mean, obviously,
but we're not saying.
Would you like me to get my? Would you like me to bring my dog in here and have her bark in the microphone for a while about who the Giants should have picked? Because
I think Weber will do. I think he can play in the NFL, but there's so many running backs in the league and good running backs who have to sign as undrafted free agents because, I think it seems like every year or two or three you've got an undrafted rookie rushing for 1,000 yards in the NFL. I think Philip Lindsay did it last year for the Broncos, maybe. But you'd mentioned J.K. Dobbins, so let's go ahead and just go down to let's just skip to the listener questions and go there because I think there's an interesting discussion here to be had about J.K. Dobbins. Also, before we get to that, I think maybe for the What If series that somebody should do this summer. What if Joe Burrow doesn't break his hand? What if Mike Weber doesn't get injured before the 2017 season? I don't know that the Weber one is all that interesting because I still think J.K. Dobbins is going to split carries with them. But I do wonder what happens if it's a fair fight and Joe Burrow is healthy the entire time. Does his leadership win out over Dwayne Haskins' superior football skills? Tom, do you know who?
it seemed at the time like Burrow was at least even and maybe a little ahead, right? I mean, I remember kind of thinking that Burrow was probably a little ahead at that point. And yeah, and the issue that Burrow ran into at that point with once the season starts, they're not interested in having a backup quarterback battle because they got to worry about getting ready for each game. Like if you go into the season as the second quarterback, you're probably the second quarterback all year. So then when JT Barrett gets hurt, it's Joe Burrow coming in on the road at Michigan. And what does that happen? You know, what does that game look like then? And does that mean that Joe Burrow is the starting quarterback? And then does Dwayne Haskins transfer to Maryland? And then Maryland beats Ohio State last year and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, that one is a real, there's a real butterfly effect there if Joe Burrow's healthy in camp and wins that backup job.
It's almost too much to like even process because it's like, well, if this happens, then this would happen. But I know one thing that would happen if he was the backup quarterback, and then when JT Barrett goes down, and you have Rashawn Gary saying, who's coming in? Oh, it's number 10. We're going to get his butt, and then you'd have a Buckeye fan saying, "That's Joe Burrow's."
Joe Burrows and Dwayne Haskins.
All right, let's go to the questions and let's knock these things out of here.
All right, at Van Gogh 0, is J.K. Dobbins still a lock to leave early due to the number of running backs who fell in the 2019 draft? Does the ability to potentially set all-time rushing records / college degree now approach the allure of the NFL?
The college degree, not necessarily. For some, it does, or they like to say it does. The fact that you can come back anytime, you can take classes online, I think that part is diminished because going pro doesn't preclude you or eliminate the degree option. The all-time rushing, I don't know. Where is Archie? He's at 6,000 yards, something like that ish, or no? Tom, we should have. I'll vamp, but while you look this up, as I hear you clicking. Interestingly, when Jeff Okudah was asked if this was his last year, and one of the things he said was he wants to leave. He wants his picture on the wall with the other great cornerbacks, and if he can't accomplish that, that would be a disappointment. He's more focused on that necessarily than leaving after 3 years. And I know if you're an Ohio State cornerback and if you play out your eligibility, people are like, gosh, what's wrong with you? But he really wants to be one of the greats at Ohio State, and there's every opportunity for him that's going to happen this year. But J.K. Dobbins, he's at 2,500 yards now. I think he could definitely get up to, 5,000 yards if he stayed for 4 years. I don't know that that's really a huge draw for him. As Tom, you just said, if you're a running back, leave early. I wonder how much KJ Hill wanting to be the all-time leading receptions guy at Ohio State factored into him coming back. But how far away is he from Archie right now?
Right now, he is at 24.56. So Archie's record is 55.89. Yeah. So he needs 3,000, basically 3,030 yards.
He could get that.
3,130 yards. He could if he had two more big seasons. Yeah. He basically needs two more 1,500 plus yard seasons, and he had 1,400 as a freshman and 1,053 as a sophomore. So that would be two big seasons, but that's probably 400 more carries to get him to those numbers. So would you rather have those 400 carries all be for the glory of All State U, or would you rather have 200 of those carries be for that wonderful and absolutely worthwhile purpose, and the other 200 be for cash money? Because I think I have a feeling I know what the answer is there. He's absolutely right. The question is absolutely right. The running back position fell off a cliff this year in the NFL draft, and it has kind of been trending that way anyway. But there were two running backs picked in the top 2 rounds of the draft. That's it. The first one was Josh Jacobs from Alabama, went 24th overall. The second one was Miles Sanders, who went late in the second round from Penn State. And then there's kind of a run in the third round. But a third round pick is not getting a huge first contract. And the NFL running back career is not long enough that, you're going to have a third contract usually. So you're going to get that first contract. You're going to make however many, whether that's 10 or 15 or 20 million or whatever dollars that is in that first contract, if that. And, you want to get to that second contract as quickly as possible because that's where you're potentially going to make your money. So it's probably not worth delaying that for a full season just to chase a record. So, I mean, and there are guys who probably should have left early who did not. Bryce Love from Stanford came back last year, was perceived as a Heisman frontrunner, did not have a good year, had injury problems, 4th round pick. That is not great. I mean, that's Dexter Williams from Notre Dame. He was a senior last year, had a pretty good year, 6th round pick. Rodney Anderson from Oklahoma, redshirt junior, 6th round pick. That's you. If you're going to go there, unless there is some reason to suspect there's a major sea change on the way in how the NFL scouts and evaluates and drafts running backs, and I don't think that's probably going to happen in the next 2 years, you just go start that meter as soon as you can start that meter, and then get to that second contract as soon as you can get to that second contract.
And even if he has a year like he did last year, which is a bad year, I still think he's gone. If you're a 3-year starter at Ohio State, you're pretty much okay, well, now it's time to take that next step and move on to your next journey. If you stay for 4 years, I think there's people looking at you like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you trying to make that next step to the NFL? Why aren't you ready to become a professional football player? Do you not have the courage or the desire to be at the top of your profession? And so I don't think that's the case with him. I think he's gone, and I don't expect him to have another 4.2 yard per carry season. I think he'll play well enough to be to leave early. And whether if people want to get upset because he leaves early and is a 4th round draft pick, I mean, that's just the nature of the position, and I think his size and really just the number of guys that are out there. When it's Ezekiel Elliott is rare. I think Josh Jacobs is a rare guy, and he was, like you said, the 24th pick, and a guy like that who was split carries with 2 other guys, but was always really, really good. And he was, it took the Raiders to take him that early for him to go in the 1st round. So I don't know that we can say when the common theory is if you're a 1st rounder, you should go. That doesn't necessarily apply to running backs. And it doesn't apparently apply to Ohio State receivers because they haven't had one go in the 1st round since Gonzo and Ted Ginn, which is insane. And like Michael Thomas, Devin Smith, Curtis Samuel, now Paris Campbell, who did leave early, but with Thomas and Curtis Samuel, when those guys aren't good enough, quote unquote, good enough to be first rounders, you can't fault them for leaving early and falling short of that mark. So I expect him to go, and it's not because, and don't get upset when he's not a first rounder, because nobody here, I don't know that many people think he's a first rounder right now, especially not after the season he had last year. But it would be nice, sure, in an ideal world, he's like, yeah, I want to come back and win and lead the all-time rushing record, like Mike Doss. I want to come back for my senior season to win a national championship. It doesn't always happen, and you have to go back to 2001 when you had somebody come back for a reason like that.
Two quick things that just worth mentioning briefly. Number one is he could, with a 1,500-yard season, pass Ezekiel Elliott and be the number 2 all-time running back in Ohio State history. So that would be a pretty good, that would take a pretty good season, but he's like 1,506 yards behind Ezekiel Elliott. So that's one thing he could do that would be, and then you're leaving on a high note. You've passed Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah. So that would be a pretty good way to go out. Number 2, do you know how many career rushing yards Carlos Snow had?
I will say like 1,900.
2,999. There is an assistant coach or a staff member on the let's see, that would have been the 1991 Ohio State coaching staff who really needed to tell old Coop, you got to give Carlos Snow the ball one more time, get him one more yard so he's got 3,000 career yards, because that is just mean. So what, 1991 was at the Hall of Fame Bowl against Auburn or something, so they got killed that year. Or no, was it Georgia? That might have been one of the Citrus Bowls against Georgia or something.
Garrison Hurst.
Whoever it was a bowl game they lost, and that was one where go ahead and get your man one more yard, because that's just mean to leave him looking like a price at a gas station. 2,999.
Did he only have one 1,000-yard season? Because he had an odd career.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I'm not prepared to answer based on the PDF of the Ohio State record book that is sitting in front of me.
I closed down my browser. Sorry.
He has Carlos Snow in 1991. Let's see, he had in 88 he had 775 yards. In 89 he had 990. In 1990 Robert Smith took over as the starting running back. And then when Robert Smith had his little Elliott Uzelac thing in 91, Carlos Snow was once again the leading rusher, and he had 828 yards.
So no 1,000-yard season.
No 1,000-yard season. He had 190 carries for 990 yards and 11 touchdowns in 1989. But that was the closest he got to 1,000, I believe, because I don't think he had a 1,000-yard season the same year Robert Smith did. That's
crazy to rush for essentially 3,000 yards and never go over 1,000 yards, you'd think. But he was a 4-year contributor, so it was up and down, and there were some weird seasons in there, like you said, with Robert Smith, and but there were some of those backfields, even after Carlos Snow, with Robert Smith, Braymont Harris, Dante Lee, Eddie George, Butler Benote, just completely ridiculous. We don't need to go off on that tangent, but man.
Wow. One more thing. Let's see. I'm trying to decide which is my favorite year of Ohio State rushing leaders. I'm going to say Brandon Sane is listed as 337 in 2010, but I think that's just because because Boom Herron is not a Boom Herron asterisk didn't play asterisk in 2010.
Or Terrell Pryor.
Why. The real audible gasp one is the 2004 leading rusher. How many yards did Lydell Ross have in 2004 to be the leading rusher of the Ohio State football team? Oh, you're way under. 475.
I knew it was under 5. Man, that was so ugly.
Woof.
When like Brandon Joe against Michigan, when he is your best running option, just smash him in there and get you out of your own end zone when he's your best option. And Antonio Pittman came in as a freshman 175 pounds, and he's your other best option. And oh man, now you've depressed everybody, Tom.
You just reminded them about a shocking upset win over Michigan. I don't think anyone's depressed. I think everyone right now is going, yeah, Troy Smith looked like a pretty good running option in the Michigan game, huh?
True.
That's what everyone's saying. So no one's depressed. All right. We're gonna do. Would you like to do Adam Vonderhaar's question next?
Sure.
Who blew a bigger lead, the Night King or Penn State against OSU in Happy Valley this year?
Remind me exactly. Was that a 20-point lead or?
Who, the Night King?
No, I'm sorry, Penn State. Was it 18 points?
I think was 2 touchdowns this year. Was it 2 and some change? Because it was a 3 touchdown lead last year. They were up, 26-14 in the fourth quarter. They were up 26-14 with 8 minutes left.
Yeah,
that's. Yeah. I mean, it's a 2-score lead. They were never up by more than 2 scores. They were up 13-0 and they were up 26-14.
Yeah, I'm still gonna go the Night King because, everybody, imagine when his army kills people, then those dead soldiers become part of his army. So it's almost like you score twice. So imagine if Ohio State scores 7, they actually get 14 out of it. Or if Penn State did, and you keep getting all of these double scores, and then you still lose. It's an incredible choke job by the Night King to even be put in a position like that. It's one of his guys had a punt come and hit his heel, basically, and then Michigan State recovers it and goes on to upset the number 1 Night King army, the army of the undead, number 1 in the nation, should have won a national title, should have ruled the 7 kingdoms, and they completely choked. Yeah, no, definitely him. I don't think you can make an argument for Penn State, which was a remarkable failure on their part, but no, definitely the Night King, who had everything. What do you think his win probability was at that point on ESPN? 99.9, 99.8? I mean, it's way up there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. He basically has, it's like they're playing basketball to 21. And because he can raise the dead and have them join his army, he basically has make it, take it, and the other team does not have make it, take it, and he's got a lead, and he still blew it.
How?
Running the ball up the middle on 4th and 5 from Penn State last year was, that was a great moment in generalship as well, for sure. But I have made this joke on Twitter, but if you follow me on Twitter, that's your fault. So you're going to say it again. To have that much of a massive personnel advantage and then just completely blow it just because you have just completely imploded schematically. He's Greg Schiano. That's who he is. He's Greg Schiano.
Jeez.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of people saw that tweet because a lot of people liked that tweet. You know what no one said? No, that's unfair and or inaccurate. Not a one. Do you know why?
Why?
Instead of the Battle of Winterfell, that was the Battle of Iowa City last week on HBO.
So do you think the Night King's plan of attack was too complicated? And what they need is a new Night King to simplify things? Is that what you're telling me?
He played his linebackers too close to the line of scrimmage. That's I think the big takeaway.
He needed
last week's Battle of Winterfell.
He needed the linebackers back further so that they could protect him. But no, he wanted them up helping the defensive line, and you see where that got him. It got him a knife right in the gut. Spoilers. Yeah, that was bad. Let me ask you this: who do you think the Night King would take at quarterback with the 6th pick overall? Daniel Jones or Dwayne Haskins?
let's see. The Night King would have to be the GM of the Packers, because what's the furthest north coldest team? I guess we'll go with the Packers. So
he'd move the Vikings outdoors.
He'd have to trade the pick because he wouldn't want to tick off Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, no, he blew it. It was if this had happened in real life, they'd be like, yeah, you can't even write that. But yet they did write it, and he looks like a complete buffoon and deserves all of the ridicule and the memes that he is going to get. I hope he can no longer look his children in the face. He no longer has a face or eyes, but he should be embarrassed and be forced to rewatch his own failures on a loop into eternity, basically.
I did feel pretty vindicated when the put everyone in the tombs with the guy who can raise the dead turned out to not be a great plan. Did feel pretty good about that, but I was expecting a lot more. I think if we went back and listened to last week's show, we would be very high on the death probability for a lot of people, because I was basing that on, a whole bunch of people are going to die, and it was like, well, I mean, a whole bunch of people died, but it was a whole bunch of nameless, faceless nobodies who no one knew who they were. There was a surprisingly small number of major character deaths, I thought.
I wonder if it's just a false sense of security for what's to come. But there's just so much going on. You can't really spend too much time on people dying because they threw so much into that episode. Not that anybody could see it because it was so dark, but that's another podcast.
I guess we should probably retroactively say, spoiler alert. So maybe we have to put that in the description of the podcast or something. If you haven't watched Game of Thrones, go back and don't listen to the last 10 minutes or so of this podcast. But although if you're on the internet or on any kind of connected device, sorry, it's been spoiled for you. That is basically, I saw someone compare it to basically a live sporting event where it's like, you can't expect, it is enough of an event that you cannot expect it to not be spoiled for you.
Yep.
So.
And there have been other shows that I don't tweet live during, but this isn't just a typical show. It's everybody's watching it at that time. And so it's okay to talk about, just like it's okay to talk about the Packers or the hockey game going on right now or the Blue Jackets. It's an event. So people need to get off their whiny horses and just deal with being spoiled. All right. Now I gave people, I didn't do any spoiling of Avengers, and I still haven't, I'm not out there talking about it on Twitter because that's different, but still people need to go. You can't just wait forever to not be spoiled. You either need to watch the movie or get off the pot, watch the show, or just, whatever. But so, Tom, I think that wraps up the show.
Yeah, you sounded like you were asking a question there, but that should have been a statement. We're wrapping up the show.
We're wrapping up the show. I want to thank everybody for listening. If this show felt like a rerun, it was not. It was an actual. We're recording this on. I'm looking at a newspaper right now, and it says May 1st. I can't ruffle it for you because I don't really have a newspaper. But yes, this is a live, current, present day recording. It just happens to be talking about stuff we've already talked about. So thank you for listening. We always appreciate your reviews. If your review this week is they talked about this last week, don't leave that one. Feel free to leave 5 stars and then say, I like how thorough they are about stuff on each show, even if that thoroughness continues weeks at a time. If you leave it vague like that, that's perfect.
5 stars. They were ahead of the news and right this time.
Perfect, Tom. I need you to create a new Yahoo account, something like that, and leave that one. That would be great. And if everybody else would do that same thing, that would be awesome as well. So if you want to leave those reviews, if you screenshot them, DM them to me, email them to me, DM them to Tom, email Tom, and we'll see what else we can find to get out to you guys. Did we ever get out a meal ticket from the Michigan State game?
I don't think we did. I have to go through. I have like a whole shelf at the top of my closet that just kind of like football stuff. And I can't remember if I mailed out the Kirk Herbstreit credential from the Penn State game last year. I might have sent that out at some point. I think I've sent out all my Rose Bowl programs already, and I think all my copies of the trilogy. But I can't remember. I don't I don't remember if I sent out the Michigan State meal ticket or not, but if I didn't, it's still good for a hot dog if you can go back in time to 2018.
Yeah, so look forward to that. Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you next week.
Blessed through